The institution of slavery exists for almost 250 years by the time we get to 1860. It wasn't even close to fading away.
Though the fight against slavery had been in the air for decades, presidential candidates running against the institution of slavery were rare. And those who had run on the platform in the past had lost.
Abolition hasn't been a successful political movement. It's known in the country, it has a kind of social influence, but there's no abolitionist party that ever won a majority of any county anywhere in the country.
By the time Abraham Lincoln begins his bid for the presidency, the tide is beginning to shift. The country is spreading westward, and one of the most pressing debates of the day is whether or not slavery will spread westward with it. One way or another, Lincoln's success or failure will be determined by the issue of slavery. Neither the more conservative Democrats nor their more socially liberal counterparts are calling for the complete abolition of slavery at this point. But while Lincoln and his party carve out a clear position against the spread of slavery into any new territories or states,
They believe it to be right.
their rivals struggle to find a consensus. It is a make or break moment for the Democrats, and in the end, they break along geographic lines.
The Northern Democratic Party nominated Stephen Douglas. The Southerners had their own convention. They nominated the vice president, John C. Breckinridge of Kentucky. And so going into the election of 1860, there were two Democratic candidates running for president.
The pro-slavery vote is now split between Douglas, Breckinridge, and John Bell from the Constitutional Union Party. Lincoln sees a path to victory, but it won't be easy. 4 years earlier, renowned explorer John Fremont had run for the Republicans on a similar platform, though with a stronger anti-slavery message. He lost handily. 3 pivotal battleground states, Pennsylvania, Illinois, and Indiana, worth a combined 51 electoral votes in 1860, had voted against him.
To win the 1860 election, you really have to flip Illinois, Pennsylvania, and Indiana. And the Republicans are really aware of this.
While the electoral math from 1860 sounds in many ways like the electoral math from today, there are a few key distinctions between Lincoln's election and those from this century. Most importantly, who is voting?
Those who are eligible to vote in 1860 are white males, ages 21 and older. There are some states where free black men could vote.
But even those who couldn't cast a ballot could still be politically active.
They get involved by holding fundraisers, by holding rallies, by passing out pamphlets and flyers, and encouraging those who do vote. They become essentially the ground crew during the election.
These local party organizers, whether they were eligible to vote or not, were key to Lincoln's efforts. Since the time of George Washington, it had been considered taboo for a candidate to go out and campaign on his own.
Stephen A. Douglas, one of the 2 Democratic candidates, did something that was different. He went on a speaking tour. He actually had a sort of a fiction that he needed to go and visit his sick mother. Well, the tour to see his sick mother ended up going throughout the United States.
Douglas's speaking tour doesn't go over well with the press. Though he spends his campaign home in Springfield, Lincoln is working the back channels diligently. He charms influential news editors, while his inner circle publishes favorable articles about him and aligns with high-visibility political clubs like the Wide Awakes. He may not be campaigning the way we understand campaigning in the 21st century, but he and his team are pushing hard for the presidency. On the first Tuesday of November 1860, he'll discover if his efforts pay off.
And Election Day draws the highest turnout to that point in American history, 81.2% of eligible voters.
Back in Springfield, Lincoln votes for every Republican on the ballot, except himself. Again, a tradition of the time. He then moves between his office in the State House and the local telegraph office, greeting well-wishers and awaiting results.
The new technology of the telegraph, invented just about 15 years earlier, had already revolutionized American politics. And so for the first time, people were able to learn the election results almost as soon as they had happened. People were fired up in a way that I think they had never been before.
He's made notes of how the Republican candidate, Fremont, performed in different counties 4 years earlier. His first test against those data points comes when the returns from the West, including his home state of Illinois, come in. Fremont lost Illinois. Lincoln needs to win it. But it's also the home state of Northern Democrat Stephen Douglas. Even Lincoln's hometown of Springfield is at best a toss-up.
Springfield generally went Democratic. It went against Fremont in 1856.
Lincoln takes Illinois.
Congratulations, Lincoln.
There was never a doubt that Lincoln would repeat Fremont's success in New England, nor was there any doubt that he would be shut out of the Deep South. In fact, Republican tickets don't even appear in much of the South. The next test is Indiana, where Lincoln may have already had a preview for how that state would go.
Today, our elections are generally held in November. In the 19th century, states held state elections all throughout the year. And so there were a number of important gubernatorial elections in the fall of 1860. The Republicans swept these state elections, and that gave Lincoln great hope.
Informal straw polls conducted by the local newspapers on nearby trains and ferries also pointed to a shift toward Lincoln.
Mr. Lincoln?
The polls are on the money.
Votes are in Illinois and Indiana. You've carried both, sir.
Lincoln has flipped Illinois and Indiana.
Congratulations.
As the excitement builds in Springfield, all eyes turn to Pennsylvania and New York, the two biggest electoral prizes of the night.
Those two states way outweighed the Electoral College voting might of all the southern states.
And in these crucial contests, Lincoln has an ace in the hole. He's successfully lobbied for the support of two political heavyweights in Simon Cameron of Pennsylvania, the future Secretary of War, and William Seward of New York, the future Secretary of State. Both helped deliver their home states for Lincoln. And with that,
Mr. Lincoln,
the presidency.
you have won New York. Congratulations, sir.
So Lincoln only wins 39% of the popular vote, but he wins an electoral majority in this complicated four-way race.
Northern Republicans were elated that they had won the election. Southerners, on the other hand, were outraged. And so they believe they need to take action, and the Deep South begins moving towards secession.
The divide between the states reflected in the 1860 electoral map foreshadows the Civil War that would begin the following year. But on this day, in Abraham Lincoln's hometown of Springfield, Illinois, there were only celebrations that went long into the night.